If you think you know what goes on inside a convent, prepare yourself. Because after I tell you what I lived through, you'll never look at a nun the same way again. I spent 8 years cloistered, believing I was serving God. But what I discovered there almost destroyed my faith and my life. This story isn't for everyone, but maybe you need to hear it before it's too late. But before I tell you, please like and subscribe to the channel, because these kinds of stories aren't told on television or in newspapers. But here, I tell you the truth. My name is Hope. I was born and raised in a small town where everyone knew each other. A place of dirt roads, Sunday mass, processions with bands and fireworks. My mother always told me I was different, that I had a light in my eyes that only pure souls carry. Too pure for this cruel world, she'd repeat, while braiding my hair and putting on my white dress for church. And I believed her. How could I not believe her, when from childhood we learn to trust what our elders tell us? I grew up surrounded by images of saints, rosaries hanging on the walls, and novenas playing on the radio at night. Faith was the compass for everything. And from a young age, I believed God had something reserved for me. I just couldn't imagine what. At 19, I felt the calling. It was during Holy Week. Father John spoke about vocation and dedication, about renouncing the world to serve God. Every word struck me deeply. I left that mass decided. I was going to be a nun. I was going to dedicate my life to service, love, and obedience. My mother cried so much when I told her, half with pride, half with sadness. My father said nothing, but his look said everything. Still, they supported me. After all, who wouldn't bless a daughter who wants to serve God? So I entered the convent of St. Martha of the Heavens on a remote hill surrounded by tall grass and silence. The place seemed frozen in time. Stone walls, narrow windows, everything smelling of old mold and extinguished candles. And a silence. That silence that weighs, that swallows sound, that silences even thought. At first, I thought I couldn't bear it. Waking up at 4 a.m, praying on my knees for hours, working in the garden under blazing sun, eating tasteless food, sleeping on a hard mattress. But I forced myself to believe this was holiness, that the more I suffered, the more God would love me. The routine was always the same: prayer, work, silence, fasting, confession, punishment. Every Friday the same penance. Every Monday the same stale bread. My skin itched from the rough clothing. My body ached, but my soul, I thought, was being washed clean. But in the first months, I began to notice things. Small, subtle things. But when you live in a place where everything is written in stone, any deviation shines like a light in darkness. There were sisters who ate better, others who wore different clothes, more comfortable under their habits. Some didn't need to get up as early, and there were those who disappeared down the hallways at night. At first, I thought it was all my imagination. Maybe they were exceptions for health reasons. Maybe they had more experience. Who was I to question it? Me, a novice who had just arrived, barely understood what this life meant. Until the day the bishop came to visit the convent. He arrived in the morning, in a gleaming black car, with a driver wearing a tie. Mother Dorothy, the Mother Superior, seemed like a nervous child. She even dropped her rosary on the floor. The bishop didn't even bend down to help her. He just gave me a look that sent chills down my spine. It wasn't the look of a shepherd. It was the look of an owner. At the lunch specially prepared for him, while we ate the watery beans as always, I observed the mother's posture. It wasn't respect. It was fear. Real fear. Submission. As if that man held in his hand something more than the authority of his cassock. When he put his hand on her shoulder and said, "Sister, we need to resolve that pending matter," her face went pale. Her mouth trembled. And her eyes, they became like those of a cornered animal. It was that day I understood, for the first time, that not everything in that place was as sacred as it seemed, that perhaps, behind the thick walls of the convent, were hidden not only God's peace, but also men's secrets. After that visit, it was as if a blindfold had been removed from me. I began to see what had always been there, but that my faith, or perhaps my naivety, had prevented me from seeing. The whispers in the hallways became more frequent. Doors that closed quickly when I approached, glances exchanged between some nuns. Everything seemed part of something that no one dared to name. And I was no longer the girl enchanted by the stained-glass windows of the chapel. I observed, and seeing hurt. It was during this period that I began to notice an older nun, almost invisible to the others, Sister Beatrice. They said she had been there since the founding of the convent, an elderly woman hunched over, with hands stained by time and years of work in the back garden. The other nuns said she was a little distracted, that time had clouded her ideas. But it wasn't that. She spoke little because she knew too much. One hot afternoon, one of those when the sun seems to melt your bones, I was kneeling, pulling weeds from the garden with my habit stuck to my body from sweat. That's when I felt her hand on my shoulder. A fragile but firm hand. She offered me a glass of water. "Drink, child. It's very hot today," she said in a low, soft voice. I drank it as if it were holy water. When I went to return the glass, I saw her looking around, as if checking whether anyone was watching me. And then, suddenly, she grabbed my hand with a strength that startled me. "You're different from the others," she murmured in a whisper. "You still have light in your eyes. It's dangerous here." I didn't understand. She saw my confusion and squeezed my hand even tighter. "Never trust too much in someone who wears a cross on their chest, daughter. Not everyone who speaks of God is willing to live for him." I felt a chill. Hearing that there, in a place where even the floor seemed sacred, was almost blasphemy. "Sister Beatrice, are you saying that?" She brought her wrinkled finger to my lips. "Shh, don't speak. Just listen. And remember, not all silence is prayer. Sometimes silence hides a scream." Before I could ask more, we heard footsteps. She let go of my hand and went back to tending the lettuce as if nothing had happened. It was Sister Josephine, one of Mother Dorothy's favorites. "Sister Beatrice, Mother is calling. It's time to take your medicine." She got up slowly, like an obedient child. But before turning the corner, she looked at me again. That look said more than any sermon I had heard. From that day on, I began to observe everything more carefully. And the more I observed, the more I realized some nuns disappeared out of nowhere. They said they had been transferred to special missions, but no one received a letter from them. Others seemed to be on a different wavelength, with minor privileges, lighter tasks, and better clothes under their habits. Meanwhile, most of us had calluses on our hands and scars on our knees. I realized there were invisible groups within, the chosen ones, always close to the mother, with access and favors, the obedient ones who suffered in silence, and the invisible ones who were there one day and simply vanished the next. Beatrice rarely spoke to me again after that day, but when we passed each other in the hallways, she looked at me the same way, and I understood. Keep watching. It was a hot night when everything changed. I couldn't sleep. The air felt still, suffocating. I got up, thirsty, and went to the kitchen. I knew it was forbidden to walk after curfew, but something told me I had to go. I went down the stairs in silence. The convent at night was another world. The shadows on the walls seemed to dance. And then I heard footsteps. Quick, heavy. They weren't a woman's footsteps. They were a man's. I hid behind a column and saw a priest pass by. It wasn't the chaplain. It was someone else. Taller, more imposing, with a stern expression. I followed him carefully. My heart was beating so loud I thought they would hear me. The priest entered a room. I waited a moment. I approached. It was the old archive, a door that always remained closed. I put my ear close. Voices. One male, firm, the other female, weaker. It was Mother Dorothy. "We have no other choice," he said. "She knows too much." "But she's just a child," the mother replied with a trembling voice. "Exactly. That's why it needs to be controlled before she starts talking." Silence. "Where are we going to send her?" "Convent of Our Lady of Silence, in Willowbrook." When I heard that name, my blood froze. I had already heard rumors about that place, a convent from which sisters never returned. And then I heard the scraping of a chair. Footsteps. They were coming toward the door. I tried to flee, but I tripped over a wooden bench. The noise echoed like thunder. The door burst open. "What are you doing here, Sister Hope?" Mother's voice cut through the air like a blade. I tried to answer, but my throat was dry. Behind her, the priest looked at me with stony eyes. He said, "Go back to your room and forget what you heard." I ran away, my legs trembling. I returned to my room and cried all night. That night, I understood once and for all, this convent wasn't what it seemed, and I was in danger. After that night, the world I knew became a minefield. Every step I took inside the convent seemed watched, measured. The next morning, when I went down to the chapel, I felt Mother Dorothy's gaze on me. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Coldness, calculation. During Mass, I knelt to receive the host and looked directly into her eyes. The look of someone who decides destinies, of someone who measures others' silence as if it were currency. I was trembling inside, but I forced myself to maintain composure. I knew that if I showed fear, I would be lost. In the recvistry, I noticed some nuns whispering. They looked at me fixedly and then disappeared. Did they know that I had been caught, or was it just my expression that betrayed my anguish? That day, Sister Beatrice didn't appear for breakfast. Her place at the head of the table was empty. My heart sunk. I asked Sister Josephine, trying to sound casual, "Is Sister Beatrice sick?" She looked at me with a strange expression between pity and warning. "She was transferred this morning. Special mission." My stomach dropped. Beatrice? Transferred? Among everyone, she could barely walk straight. The memory of the conversation between the priest and the mother flooded me. She knows too much. Were they talking about Beatrice? Or about me? I spent the entire day like a ghost. I fulfilled all the routine tasks, swept the hallways, washed the kitchen utensils, prayed at the appropriate times. But my head was alert the whole time. One afternoon, while I was scrubbing the stone floor near the chapel, I saw Sister Rosalie approaching. She was one of the chosen ones, always close to the mother, always with access to what no one else had. Beautiful, discreet, and with a look that mixed pity and superiority. "Mother wants to see you now," she said without ceremony. My heart raced. This was it, the phrase. With trembling legs, I walked down the long hallway that led to Mother Dorothy's office. The door, dark and heavy, was ajar. I knocked softly. "Come in," she replied with an unchanging voice, as if nothing in the world could surprise her. I entered. She was sitting behind the wooden desk, writing in a black-covered book. She didn't look up. "Close the door." I obeyed. I felt sweat running down my back despite the cool afternoon. "Sister Hope," she finally said, looking up. You had a very busy night, didn't you? I didn't respond. Walking through the convent at night is against the rules. You know that. I swallowed hard. She got up and walked toward me. What you saw or heard yesterday is none of your business. I remained silent. I was so scared I didn't even remember if I was breathing properly. But I understand your curiosity, she continued, with a smile that barely reached her eyes. So I thought of an educational way to channel that energy. She returned to the desk and took a sealed envelope with red wax. The diocesan seal gleamed like dried blood. Tomorrow, you will accompany Sister Rosalie to the convent of Our Lady of Silence in Willowbrook. This envelope must be delivered directly to the Mother Superior there. My knees weakened. Willowbrook. The word echoed in my head like an alarm bell. The place from which no sister had returned. The place mentioned in the secret conversation. The same place where, now, they were sending me? But why me? She didn't answer. She just looked at me fixedly. The message was clear. It was a punishment or a disposal. I left the room with the envelope burning my hands. Outside, Sister Rosalie was already waiting for me. "Did Mother tell you?" she asked with the same neutral voice as always. "Willowbrook," I replied, trying to contain my panic. She looked around as if to make sure we were alone. "There are things that are only understood when you reach the end." And she left, leaving me with that phrase floating in the air like a curse. That night, I couldn't sleep. The total darkness of my room seemed darker than ever. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the wooden ceiling. Willowbrook. The name echoed in my head as if each letter were a drum, with each beat a question. What would await me there? I got up much before dawn. There were no signs of sunrise, and I was already ready, with my rosary in hand and a change of clothes folded inside the small cloth bag. We nuns don't have possessions. I only carried the essentials, and above all, my doubts. In the courtyard, Sister Rosalie was already waiting for me. Mother Dorothy was also there, standing, holding the envelope with the red wax seal. She handed it to Rosalie, not to me, a silent warning that I wasn't to be trusted. "Remember," the mother said with a firm voice, "this document must be delivered only to the Mother Superior of Willowbrook, to no one else." "Yes, Mother," we responded together. The carriage was waiting for us, pulled by an old horse and driven by Don Jacinto, the convent's caretaker. He didn't say a word during the entire journey, and neither did we. 2 hours later, when we reached the main road, we got off the wagon and waited for the vehicle that would take us to the interior. It was an old truck converted with wooden benches and the smell of accumulated dust. We followed a dirt road that seemed to lead to the end of the world. Rosalie remained silent almost the entire time, until at one point she looked at me with a strange gleam in her eyes. "You're too curious," she said. "I just wanted to understand," I murmured, "what I saw, what I heard." "The convent has rules, and they exist for a reason." "And what is that reason?" I asked in a low voice, almost a whisper. "Why do sisters disappear? Why are some favored while others carry stones?" She turned her face away. Her silence was worse than any answer. "What happens in Willowbrook?" I insisted. This time, she looked directly into my eyes, and there was something there I didn't expect. Fear. Real fear. "You'll understand when you get there." The rest of the journey passed in silence. The higher the truck climbed, the narrower the road became. until on a sharp curve, it stopped. There stood the convent of Our Lady of Silence. But it didn't look like a convent. It looked like a prison. High walls of dark stone, tiny windows, no plants, no birds, just the wind and a silence that seemed more like a threat than peace. The nun who received us was an elderly woman with dim eyes and an expression weathered like old wood. She looked at us fixedly for a moment and asked, "Sisters from St. Martha of the Heavens?" "Yes," Rosalie replied, extending the sealed envelope. She nodded and opened the door, which creaked as if complaining about our arrival. We entered a gray stone courtyard. The air was heavy, dense, as if all the prayers celebrated there had been suffocated by time. We passed through dark hallways, damp walls, without images of saints, without crosses. The nuns we encountered walked with their heads down in absolute silence. No footsteps were heard, only presences. The guide left us in front of a heavy wooden door. "Wait here." She entered and left us there, alone in that hallway that looked more like a tomb. When the door opened, the Mother Superior appeared. A corpulent woman with thick glasses and an expression that revealed nothing, but her eyes said everything. Cold, analytical, merciless. "Come in," she ordered. We went. The room was dark, lit by a small window. Rosalie handed her the envelope. She read it calmly, line by line. Her face didn't change, but the gleam in her eyes did. It was the same gleam I had seen in the bishop weeks earlier, the gleam of someone with power, and who knows it. "You must be tired from the journey. You can spend the night here. You can return early tomorrow morning." I felt immediate relief, but it didn't last long. The mother opened a drawer and took out a rusted key. She offered it to me. "First, Sister Hope, I have a small task. Go to the end of the hallway, the last door on the left. Open it, and wait." I took the key with a trembling hand. It weighed like lead, or maybe it was fear. "Can I go with her?" Rosalie asked. "Of course," the mother smiled, but it was a poisonous smile. We left in silence. As we walked, I felt the air changing. The hallway seemed narrower, colder. Above the indicated door, a carved cross, but crooked, disfigured, like a mockery. "Should we really open it?" I asked. "We have no choice," Rosalie replied. I turned the key. The lock opened with a click. And the smell that came from inside, mold, old paper, and something else, something I couldn't identify. We entered. It was an archive, but different from everything I had seen before. Shelves full of folders, dust, yellow documents. In the center, a table with some folders separated, as if someone had left them there on purpose. Rosalie opened the first one, and there, the real nightmare began. Rosalie opened the first folder with hesitant hands. Inside was a card with a photo. It was of a young nun with a round face and sweet eyes. Above, in large letters, was written, "Sister Teresa." My heart froze. I knew that name. Teresa had passed through our convent when I was a novice, and then she simply disappeared. Below the photo were words written in hand in red, like a prayer stamp. Isolated, not suitable for a return. And just below, in a smaller field, questioned authority, spoke too much, refused to obey. Rosalie looked at me in silence, as if seeking my confirmation that indeed we were seeing this. She opened the second folder. Another nun, another story. The same fate. And another, and another. The pattern repeated like a handwritten phrase. There were dozens, women we knew by name, by face, who had passed through our lives and then vanished. Now we knew where they had gone. "My God," Rosalie whispered. "They didn't transfer them. They locked them up here." I began to feel breathless. The walls of the room seemed to close in on us. I went toward the door, pushing it slowly to leave, but before I could move, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door burst open. It was the Mother Superior, and she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by 2 other nuns, large, silent women with empty looks. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked, with a frozen smile on her face. I couldn't answer. I felt my tongue stuck to my palate. "Ah, Sister Hope," she continued, walking slowly toward us. "Curiosity is a dangerous quality, even more so in places where silence is sacred." She approached me and looked at me very closely. "Do you think you still have a choice?" It was then that I understood. This trip wasn't a mission. It was a trap. I wasn't there to deliver an envelope. I was there to stay. I looked at Rosalie, expecting her reaction, and that's when I realized something that hurt me more than anything else. She wasn't surprised. Her eyes didn't reflect fear. They reflected resignation. She knew. She had known from the beginning. And still, she came. "Sister Rosalie will return tomorrow to St. Martha. She will inform them that you have decided to stay here for a spiritual retreat." "What?" I managed to stammer. "That's a lie. I don't—" "Ah, sister," the mother interrupted softly. "You did decide. When you decided to walk through the convent after curfew. When you decided to listen behind doors. When you decided to be too curious." She nodded. The 2 nuns approached me. "Don't worry," she said, turning her back to me. "No one's going to hurt you. We're just going to teach you the value of silence." The nuns grabbed my arms tightly. I couldn't resist. Why? Who would look for me? Who would listen to me? As they dragged me through the dark hallways of that damned place, all I could think of were Sister Beatrice's words. Not all silence is prayer. Sometimes silence hides a cry. They took me to a tiny room, a cell. A wooden bed, a bench, a tiny window the size of an envelope, too high to reach. No crucifix, no candle, no hope. "You'll stay here until you learn," one of the nuns had said, before slamming the door shut. "Learn what?" I asked, trying to gather courage. "To be quiet." And then they closed the door. I was left there, in the darkness, alone. I sat on the bed and cried until I exhausted my tears. I cried for me, for Teresa, for all those who had disappeared under the guise of faith. Time passed slowly, as if the clock had forgotten to move, until I heard a soft noise. Something was passing under the door. I approached, trembling, and saw a folded paper. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was a note, written in small, hurried handwriting. "Don't trust anyone. Don't eat anything they give you. Tomorrow, pretend you're sick. I'll try to help you." There was no signature. I carefully folded the paper and hid it inside my habit. And for the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Someone there still hadn't forgotten what it was to be human. That night, I didn't sleep. Even exhausted, my fear was greater than fatigue. The paper with the note remained hidden in my habit, like an amulet. I mentally repeated every word I read. Don't trust anyone. Don't eat anything. Pretend you're sick. I'll try to help you. But who had written that? Rosalie? No, she seemed to know what was going to happen. She seemed part of the plan. Was it one of the nuns who saw the truth and still had the courage to act? I didn't know. And deep down, it didn't matter. Someone still cared about me. The sun hadn't risen yet when the key turned in the lock. The door opened, and a nun I had never seen entered. She was young, with a firm but expressionless face. She carried a tray with a bowl of porridge and a glass of water. "Your breakfast," she said, placing the tray on the wooden stool. I looked at the porridge. It was hot and smelled good. Clean water. There didn't seem to be anything wrong, but the note echoed in my mind. "I'm not hungry," I replied, forcing my voice to sound weak. "You have to eat. Mother's orders." "I'm sick. I think it's from yesterday's trip." She looked at me suspiciously, but she didn't insist. She left, carefully closing the door, and soon I heard the key locking it from outside. I waited a few minutes until I was sure she wouldn't return. I grabbed the tray and threw the porridge out the small window, then put the water back in my habit. I didn't know when they would give me another. The day dragged on. Nothing was heard but the wind outside. No nun came to see me. No prayers, no bells. It was as if I didn't exist. Time there wasn't measured in minutes, but in heartbeats. As the sun began to set, the room grew even darker. I curled up on the bed, hugging myself. Then, the door handle turned again. This time, it was the Mother Superior. She entered slowly, as if she knew she had God's authority, or at least believed it. "How do you feel, Sister Hope?" she asked, with a voice too soft. "Not very well," I replied, feigning weakness. My stomach hurt, but not from hunger, from fear. "You know why you're here, don't you?" I remained silent. "You're here because you have trouble obeying, keeping quiet, knowing your place." She walked slowly through the small room, like a teacher evaluating a stubborn student. "This place has existed for over 100 years, she said with her hand behind her back. "It was created to welcome those who need to learn. Some come by their own decision. Others," she paused briefly, "are brought." I swallowed hard. She approached the bed. "The church has its secrets, Sister Hope. Necessary secrets. To protect the flock. And anyone who threatens those secrets, well, needs protection from themselves." I felt every cell in my body vibrating with fear.
"We have two options," she continued. "You can admit you were wrong, that you went too far, that you won't question anymore. If you accept, in time, maybe you can return to your convent. Or you can continue with this stubbornness, and in that case, you'll stay here for a long time." Silence. She was waiting for my answer. I lowered my head. "I will obey, Mother." She smiled. A small smile of satisfaction, almost maternal. "Great. Tomorrow will begin your re-education process." When she left and closed the door, my legs gave out. I sat on the bed and cried again, silently. Re-education. The word sounded like a life sentence. It was already night when I heard a different sound in the lock again. It wasn't the jingling of keys. It was a different noise, as if someone was manipulating something lighter, more improvised. The door opened slowly. My heart almost stopped. Someone peeked their head through the crack. It was Rosalie. She put a finger to her lips, asking for silence. "Come with me, now." "What?" I whispered, surprised. You knew?" Yes, now she sounded more human. The mask of indifference had disappeared. But I couldn't act before. "Listen to me. We have to get out of here now." "Where are we going?" "Trust me." She took my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I could still escape. We walked in silence through a narrow hallway, lit only by the dim flame of a lamp that Rosalie held firmly. At night, the convent was a labyrinth of shadows and creaks, as if each wall kept secrets hidden for decades. Fear accompanied us, but there was also something new. Movement. Hope, though timid, was making its way behind us. "Where are we going?" I whispered, trying to follow her steps. "To the basement. There's a place they don't completely control." We went down a stone staircase that seemed carved by time itself. Each step creaked as if complaining about our weight. The air there was colder, more humid, like the inside of a well. We reached an old door, almost hidden by a tilted cabinet. Rosalie took a key from her habit, took a quick look around, and opened the rusted lock. The smell that came from inside made me step back. Dust, mold, old paper, and something else. Something I couldn't identify, but seemed rotten. "Go in," she said quietly, "and close the door." I did what she asked. The place was dark, full of shelves with boxes, old books, and documents yellowed by time. Another archive, but different from the one we saw at the beginning. Older, more secret. "What is this place?" I asked with a broken voice. "The real archive, where they keep what no one can know, what not even the trusted nuns see." She walked confidently toward the back of the room. She seemed to know the place. She began to take out boxes and rummage through papers. She was looking for something. But what? "What are you trying to find?" I asked, approaching. "Proof. Proof of what they do to those who disappear, to those who speak too much, to those who, like you, want to know the truth." I began to help. I opened boxes and flipped through papers. Many were old records of arrivals and departures of nuns, letters exchanged with the bishop, lists of medications. But then I found a different box. Inside, folders identical to the ones we had seen before, only more complete. Photos, medical notes, behavior reports. I opened one. "Sister Camille, suspected of delirium, confused speech, visions during prayer." In red, the same note as always. "Isolated, not suitable for return." "Rosalie," I called, showing the paper. "Look at this." She approached, read it, flipped through the others. She went pale. "It's worse than I caught." "What is this?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "They don't just hide, they erase." I kept reading. Files with notes about mental instability, refusal to obey, obsession with justice, unauthorized access to documents. Some mentioned treatments with strong medications. Others spoke of prolonged isolation. And the most terrifying had a seal I hadn't seen before. Definite transfer. I closed my eyes and felt my heart racing. "These who disappeared are here, or worse?" Rosalie nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. "Some never left these walls. Others, no one knows." "And why did you help me?" I asked. "You were part of this."
She lowered her head. "I was sent here too, years ago. They re-educated me. I obeyed. I kept quiet. But I never forgot." We remained silent for a few seconds. The truth was hard, harder than any physical punishment. Then we heard footsteps, noises in the hallway. Rosalie turned off the lamp and whispered, "Hide the papers, quick." We ran. We stuffed what we could into her habit.
The door burst open. It was the Mother Superior. Behind her, 2 enormous nuns just like before. "Well, well," she said with a cold smile. "What a touching scene. Our lost sister has found an accomplice." I froze. Rosalie turned around and for the first time raised her voice in front of the nun. "It's over. We know everything. We have proof." The mother laughed, a dry laugh like someone who had long ago lost shame. "And what do you intend to do? Report? To whom? Who would believe 2 unstable nuns, one of them labeled as disobedient?" She was referring to me, but something was wrong. She wasn't looking at me. She was fixed on Rosalie. And at that moment, I understood. Rosalie was also an experiment, someone they had tested, someone they had recovered. And now she had gotten out of control. "You two," the mother continued, "will return to your room. Tomorrow we'll decide what to do." The 2 nuns approached. I was trembling, but Rosalie grabbed my hand tightly. "Run!" And we ran. We ran as if the ground was going to fall out from under us. The shouts of the nuns behind us echoed through the stone hallways like hunting howls. Rosalie pulled my hand hard, guiding me through narrow passages, spiral staircases, and hidden doors. "This way," she whispered urgently. "Trust me." We turned left, then right, and crossed an abandoned cloister with cracked columns and the smell of wet earth. My heart was beating so loud I felt the blood pounding in my ears. "How do you know all this?" I asked between gasps, barely able to breathe. "Because I lived here for 3 years, trapped, until I decided to obey. I became what they wanted, until today." We climbed a side staircase that led to an old storage room. Inside, dark and suffocating, she pushed a shelf and revealed a low wooden door hidden behind cloths and old boxes. "Go," she said, opening the door. "Stay here. I'll come back for you." "No!" I grabbed her hand. "Don't leave me alone. They'll catch you." She looked at me with sadness in her eyes. "It has to be this way. If they catch us together, it's over. I'll distract them. Wait. I'll come back. Trust me." Before I could say anything more, she gently pushed me away and closed the door. I was left there, alone, in the darkness, hearing only my breathing and the muffled sound of running outside. The space was narrow, smelling of mold and wet wood. I curled up in a corner, hugging my knees. Through the crack in the door, only a thin line of light filtered through. Minutes turned into hours, or so it seemed. In that darkness, time no longer existed. I thought about everything. The disappeared nuns, Sister Beatrice, Teresa, me, and Rosalie running through the hallways to save me. Outside, the noise stopped. Silence returned. But a different silence, a silence of lurking danger. What if it's not her who comes back? What if it's a trap? I felt around the wall looking for an exit. Nothing. Just cold stone. It was then that I heard a soft scratching. Someone was manipulating the lock on the other side. My breath caught. The door opened just a crack and a voice whispered, "Sister Hope?" "Who is it?" I asked without moving. "It's Amy. Sister Rosalie sent me. We have to hurry." I opened the door a little more and saw a young nun with wide, frightened eyes. I had never seen her before. "Come on," she said, extending her hand. I took her hand and came out of my hiding place. "Where's Rosalie?" I asked. Her face fell. "They caught her. They're interrogating her." My heart sank like a stone in a deep river. "But why are you helping me?" I asked, trying to understand. "Because I'm trapped here too, just like you, just like many others." We followed another hidden hallway, narrower and even darker. Amy seemed to know exactly where she was. We climbed a narrow spiral staircase, passed behind the old sacristy, and entered a room with windows sealed with thick boards. "Where are we going?" I asked, almost breathless. "To the kitchen. From there's a back exit that almost no one uses. That's where you'll get out." She spoke quickly, but without hesitation. When we reached the silent and empty kitchen, Amy ran to a large cabinet in the corner. Behind it was a narrow door, almost invisible. "Help me push," she whispered.
We opened the cabinet together, revealing the worn wooden door. Before opening it, Amy took something from her habit, a folded paper. "Rosalie left you this. She said it's important." I took it with trembling hands. It was a note with the crooked handwriting of someone writing too fast. "Only read after leaving the door. And for God's sake, don't sleep the first night." "What does this mean?" I asked. Amy shook her head. "I don't know, but she said you should follow it to the letter." She opened the door. On the other side, a dark backyard covered with tall weeds. We followed a barely visible path, crouched down. We reached a partially destroyed wall. Amy jumped first and then helped me down. We were outside. For the first time in days, I breathed fresh air. The sky, even dark, seemed to embrace me. The singing of crickets, the wind in the leaves, everything seemed miraculous. "Now, you have to go," Amy said, pointing to a path in the forest. "It leads to the main road. From there, hitchhike to the nearest town." "And you?" She smiled sadly. "I'll go back. I have to try to save Rosalie. And the others. But they'll know you helped me." "Maybe. But someone has to do something. Go, before it's too late." I held her hand for a second. I wanted to tell her so many things, thank her, apologize, promise I would come back. But there was no time. I ran like never before. The rocks cut my feet. The branches tore my habit. I only stopped after a few minutes when I reached a dirt road. I was free. Or almost. I reached the edge of the road, panting with my habit soaked in sweat and my knees scraped. The sky was already darkening, tinged with purple, and the world seemed silent. A different silence from Willowbrook. It was the silence of freedom, though fleeting. I sat on the dirt embankment with my lungs gasping and my heart beating like a drum. I was free. But now what? Where to go? What to do? It was then that I remembered the note. I took from my habit the paper that Amy had given me. Rosalie's handwriting was shaky, but firm enough to convey a message I didn't fully understand. "Only read after leaving the door, and for God's sake, don't sleep the first night." "What does this mean?" I asked. I read and reread, trying to understand. Why not sleep? What would happen if I did? Was there some physical risk, or spiritual, or psychological? I didn't know, but one thing I did know. After everything that had happened, I couldn't ignore the warning of someone who risked her life for me. The wind began to blow colder. I hugged myself, trying to keep warm, alone, in the middle of nowhere, without money, without food, without a clear destination. It was then that I heard a noise. An engine. I hid behind a bush. Fear still spoke louder than need. It was an old, noisy car with dim headlights that barely lit the road. It was driving slowly, almost stopping. It braked a few meters ahead. The window rolled down, and a middle-aged man stuck his head out. "Hey, everything okay? I saw someone there." I didn't respond. He got out of the car. A gray-haired man with a tired but not harsh appearance. He wore a wrinkled linen shirt, cloth pants, and had a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. "Sister?" he asked when he saw me. What's a nun doing alone on this road? I approached cautiously and still trembling. I got lost, I lied, not knowing what else to say. He frowned and then pointed to the car. Want me to give you a ride? It's getting dark. This road isn't safe at night. I stood there, analyzing. What if he was part of everything? What if he had something to do with the convent? But if I stayed there, it could be worse. What more did I have to lose? I'm going to Riverside, he added. I can drop you off there. Riverside. The name reminded me of Beatrice. They said she had been transferred there. A spark lit up inside me. Maybe, just maybe. Okay, I said, getting into the car hesitantly. He started the engine. The car bounced over the rocks on the dirt road. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I'm Sebastian, he said, without taking his eyes off the road. I sell medicines. And you, sister? Mary, I replied, with the first false name that came to mind. Sister Mary, he nodded. It's strange to find you here. This road is rarely traveled. Are you from St. John's Convent? Yes, St. Martha of Heavens. It was the only true part of my answer. He looked in the rearview mirror. I know it. I've delivered there before. My sister was a nun. She had a real vocation, but she disappeared. Disappeared? She was sent to a convent of silence over in Willowbrook. They said it was for a spiritual retreat, but she never came back. I only received a closed coffin. I couldn't even see her face. They said it was an illness, but I didn't believe it. I looked at him with wide open eyes. A chill ran down my spine. What was her name? He said. Agnes. Sister Agnes. I lowered my gaze. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him everything, but the fear still prevented me from speaking. He looked at me more closely. You're not coming from Willowbrook, are you? I thought, should I keep lying or trust? His face didn't reflect malice. It reflected pain. The pain of someone who has lost someone and never received an answer. Yes, I'm leaving there. He looked at me with eyes full of disbelief and hope. Have you seen my sister? No, I'm sorry, but I saw many others imprisoned, sick, silenced. He closed his eyes as if confirming everything he had always known. I knew it, but no one listened to me. Not the bishop, not the police, not the town priest. They thought I was crazy. He started the car again and accelerated. I'll take you to a safe place. I know a boarding house in Riverside where no one will ask you questions. The owner is trustworthy. He dropped me off at the boarding house just before midnight. It was an old house with weathered wood, a tile porch, and a strong smell of freshly brewed coffee. The owner was a woman with a firm appearance and attentive gaze named Dolores. Not the mother, but a real woman with body, voice, and compassion. You can trust her, Sebastian said, helping me out of the car. She's helped people in worse situations. They received me discreetly. They didn't ask me questions. They simply showed me a room at the back of the house, simple, with an iron bed, clean sheets, and a towel on the dresser. Dolores looked into my eyes and said, "Here, no one will knock on your door without being invited." I nodded in gratitude. I could barely speak. My body hurt, my feet were raw, and a slight fever was beginning to rise. My body wanted to lie down, sleep, forget. But then I remembered the words from the note. Don't sleep the first night. It was eating at me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, shivering. The half-open window let in a current of cold air and a ray of moonlight that illuminated the room. The house was silent, but there was something strange in the air, as if my mind were more sensitive, more alert. Something told me that sleeping would be more dangerous than staying awake. I got up and began to pace back and forth in the room. Each step hurt, but the movement kept me sane. I took a pitcher of water and threw it on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. Sunken eyes, gaunt face, the expression of someone who had seen hell and survived. Around 2 a.m, something began to change. It was as if the air around me thickened. My ears buzzed, as if an invisible pressure had settled. I felt dizzy, and for an instant I almost fell. I sat back down and breathed deeply. The sensation was the same I had felt during moments of deep prayer in the convent, but distorted, dark. It wasn't a spiritual elevation. It was something else. It was then that I heard it. Footsteps. Inside the room. Guided. I looked around. There was no one. But the footsteps continued. Slow. Dragging. As if someone was stepping on the floor with wet feet. I looked at the floor. There were no footprints. But the sound was there. Real. I jumped up, my heart pounding hard. I ran to the door and tried to open it. It was locked. "Mrs. Dolores," I called softly. Nothing. The windows vibrated with the wind, but no other sound was heard from outside. Just footsteps. And then a voice. "Hope." My blood froze. That voice, short, familiar, but impossible. Hope. It came from inside my head, or didn't it? I began to pray. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Ave Maria, any prayer that came to my mind. But the words came out weak, as if they lost strength in the air. The voice continued. "You've seen, now you need to carry." What do you carry? The guilt? The truth? The pain? I tried to turn on the light. The bulb flickered and burned out, plunging the room into darkness. I closed my eyes tightly. I was no longer in Willowbrook. I wasn't trapped, but something had come with me. Rosalie's note, what she knew, maybe that was it. It wasn't just a conspiracy. It was more. It was spiritual. It was an invisible weight, something that now clung to me. I stayed like that, sitting on the floor, reciting everything I knew, until the first sign of sun began to invade the room. And only when the first ray touched the floor, the footsteps stopped. The sensation in the air had disappeared, the buzzing ceased. I was, again, alone. Exhausted, still trembling, I lay down, but I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I woke up to a soft knock on the door. It was Dolores. "I made coffee. It's hot, and there's cornbread." I got up slowly, as if coming out of a battle. "Mrs. Dolores," I said with a hoarse voice, "something happened." She looked at me with serious eyes. She waited. "Last night, I heard things." She sighed. "You're not the first. Others who have passed through here also arrived with their spirits stirred." "Like this?" She approached. She spoke softly. "Those places where you've been don't just serve to silence those who speak. They break the soul. They leave scars that don't heal. And sometimes that wound attracts bad things." I remained silent. She gave me a cup of coffee. "But there is a cure," she added, "if you have the courage to continue and not run away." "Run away? I've already run from everything." "No, run from the truth, because it will hurt you more than any punishment you've suffered." I sat at the table. I drank my coffee in silence. The heat of the liquid brought me back to my body. There, in that kitchen, I realized that my escape was over. I had to do something. For me, for Rosalie, for all the others. And this story now was my mission. In the following days, I remained at Dolores's boarding house like a shadow, avoiding daylight for fear that some church scout would find me. With every step I took outside that room, I felt Willowbrook's gaze fixed on me. But at the same time, a flame grew inside me. A vocation. I couldn't keep hiding, not after everything, not after what Rosalie sacrificed, not after what I saw. On the morning of the fourth day, I gathered courage. I put on civilian clothes that Dolores had lent me, an old, loose dress that looked nothing like my usual attire. I tied my hair with a scarf, grabbed the folder that Rosalie and I had managed to recover from the secret archive, and left. I needed to find someone who would listen to me, someone outside this sick system. The first idea was the police station. I entered through the main door with my heart in my throat. A middle-aged policeman with a suspicious look greeted me. "Can I help you with something?" I handed him some papers from the counter. He took them and began to flip through them. As he read, his expression went from suspicion to disbelief. "This is serious," I interrupted. "And there's much more. Hundreds of women were silenced, forcibly interned, drugged, and some died. Are you one of the nuns?" I was, but today I'm just someone trying to prevent others from going through what I went through. He asked me to wait. He disappeared for a few minutes and returned with a woman with short hair, a forensic coat, and a civil police badge. "I'm Dr. Helen. I've been told you have important documents."
I repeated everything. I spoke about the isolated nuns, the hidden structure, the medical records, the disappeared nuns, the re-education, and finally, I spoke about Rosalie. My voice broke because every word reminded me of her eyes saying, "Trust me." "We have enough evidence to open an investigation," Helen said firmly. "But you have to understand, this is against a powerful institution. It won't be easy or fast." "I know, but I can't stay quiet anymore." She took my statement, collected copies of the files, and promised that everything would be sent to the public ministry. "And you? Are you going to stay here?" I thought for a moment. "I can't leave until I know what happened to Rosalie." "We'll find out." But I knew it depended on me. I knew the ways, the lies, the faces. If anyone could find Rosalie, it was me. That night, I didn't return to the boarding house. I went to the bus station and bought a one-way ticket to Willowbrook, using the little money that Dolores had secretly given me, along with a crumpled note. "Only come back if it's for everyone." The road was the same, but my eyes were different. There was no longer fear. There was fury. Fury and love for those who had been erased. Now I was their voice. I arrived in the city late in the afternoon. I stayed in simple lodging, paying for a room that barely had a bed. And immediately, I began to search. I spoke with lifelong residents. I heard whispered stories of families whose daughters had been interned. Some said they had gone crazy. Others said that they had received divine light and had disappeared on a mission. All lies. I went to the main church in the city, where the local priest received me with superficial kindness. The convent of Our Lady of Silence. Ah, yes, a place of great recollection. The nuns there are discreet, very religious. They don't receive visits. "What happens if one of the nuns goes missing?" I asked. The priest narrowed his eyes. "It happens. Sometimes they're transferred, or they go on missions to other dioceses." "Without notice? Without goodbye?" He didn't answer. I returned to the inn sure that everyone there knew, and everyone pretended not to know. The next morning, I walked toward the dirt road that led to the convent. I walked alone, with the sun at my back and my document folders hidden in a lining hand-sewn by Dolores. I reached the dark stone walls and stopped. I wasn't going to enter. Not yet. I sat outside and stayed there for hours until the door creaked. A nun came out, young, frightened. She saw me. She stopped. She recognized me. Amy. "Hope?" she whispered, running towards me. We hugged tightly. "I thought you were dead," she said with tears in her eyes. "And I thought I'd never see someone who understood me again." She looked around and took me to a corner. "I know where she is. Rosalie, she's alive." My heart raced. "Where?" "In the basement, where you found the archives. They locked her up there. They said she was dangerous, but I was able to see her. She's weak, but she's alive. I need to get her out of there. It's impossible. They locked everything up, and the mother, she's getting worse, more rigid, more cruel. And you? Can you help me?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It might be the last thing I do, but yes, I'll help you." That night, the sky was without stars. A dense blackness covered Willowbrook like a blanket. And I knew that in a way, that darkness was perfect. It was in darkness that screams were silenced, where names were erased. And now it was in darkness that I needed to enter that place again. Not longer to escape, but to get someone out. Amy received me at the back of the convent by the same path I used to escape. She wore an old habit and carried a dim lantern hidden under her tunic. "I don't have much time," she whispered. "The others are in the cafeteria preparing the week's supplies. They won't notice my absence for a few minutes." We walked in silence, each step measured, each leaf that crunched under our feet a warning. Amy opened a small service door, and we entered an empty pantry. The convent still smelled the same: wet stone, dust, and suffocating silence. "This way." We downed a creaking staircase. The hallways were darker than I remembered. The basement seemed deeper, as if the place itself had swallowed Rosalie. When we reached the old archive door, Amy took a key from her sleeve. "I found this hidden among the sheets in the laundry. I don't know if it will work." It worked. The lock turned, and the door opened with a sharp click. The room was plunged into darkness, and the air was dense, as if it hadn't been renewed in years. "Rosalie?" I called in a whisper. Silence. I entered, feeling around the place. Then I saw her, curled up in a corner, with her dirty habit, sunken eyes, and too pale face. She seemed lighter, as if she was dissolving into dust. But when she saw me, she smiled. "I knew you would come back." I fell to my knees beside her. I took her hand. It was cold, but full of life. "We'll get you out of here," I promised. With difficulty, we helped Rosalie to her feet. She could barely walk, but she leaned firmly on me. We followed the path back like shadows, in absolute silence. Each step was a miracle, and each invisible second a gift. We reached the pantry exit without anyone noticing us. But then we heard a sound. Footsteps. Someone was approaching. "Go," Amy whispered, pushing the door. "I'll stay here. I'll lead them somewhere else." "Amy, no!" I tried to stop her, but she pushed me hard and closed the door behind me. "Go, save her, and don't forget about us." Rosalie and I ran down the path. With each step, the day became brighter. When the sun finally appeared on the horizon, we were outside, alive. Sebastian was waiting for us with the car, as we had agreed the day before. He saw us arrive and ran towards us. "My God, you did it!" Rosalie could barely speak, but she smiled gratefully at him. "Take us far away," I asked.
and then to the right place. Days later, we delivered everything to the police. Documents, reports, names. Helen, the investigator, officially opened the case. The press began to report missing nuns, convent under investigation, religious re-education or illegal imprisonment. Rosalie was admitted to a clinic to recover her body and mind. I stayed with her. I spent nights reading aloud, praying, trying to give back what they had taken from her. The right to exist outside the shadows. To this day, we don't know what happened to Amy. Some say she was transferred. Others say that she disappeared like so many others before her. But I believe she's still in there, fighting. And me? I left the habit. Today, I'm a different person, an ordinary woman, but with a name marked by all those who passed through those walls. I wrote this because memory is our most precious asset. If the truth isn't told, lies triumph, and the nuns of Willowbrook cannot be forgotten. Not a single one. My name is now Hope, because that's what remained at the end of everything. Hope. If this story reached you, share it, because while we remain silent, they continue. And answer me there in the comments. Do you think I did the right thing by telling you this? Or would it have been better if I had kept silent? Here on the screen, there's another impressive true story to watch.